The first thing she said to me wasn't hello. It wasn't sorry for showing up unannounced. It wasn't even a question. She stood at the bottom of my porch steps in the dying October light. Her old coat pulled tight across her chest, mud on her boots, and she said, "My father sent me." And I looked at her, really looked at her. And I knew exactly whose daughter she was.
That everything is
because
fine.
her father was the man who had taken everything from me. I didn't say that. I didn't say anything at all for a long moment. I just stood there with dirt under my fingernails and the smell of hay in my shirt, and I made the hardest decision I've ever made in my life. I said, "Come inside. My name is Matthew Vale. I'm 34 years old, and I live alone on a small farm just outside Wheatland, Oregon. It's not much by most people's standards. A modest stretch of wheat fields, a few rows of vegetables, a chicken coop, 2 dairy cows, an old red barn, and a 2-story wooden house my family left behind. But it's enough to keep a man busy from sunup until dark, enough to keep the silence from swallowing him whole. The people in town don't call me Matthew anymore. They call me the scarred man from the North Farm. The scar runs from my left cheekbone down toward my jaw, pale and sharp, the kind that never fully fades, left over from a tractor accident 10 years ago. Before it happened, I used to go into town more. I used to smile without thinking about it. There were even a few girls who looked at me like my time was worth something. After the accident, everything changed. Kids hid behind their mothers. Women turned their faces away. Men gave me that careful, pitying half-nod, the one that said they were glad it hadn't happened to them. So I stayed on the land. The land doesn't judge a man's face. The crops don't care if you're handsome or broken. If you tend them right, they grow. There's a kind of justice in that, and I grew to love it. That October afternoon, the sun was turning the wheat field behind the house into liquid gold. I had just come in from the pumpkin patch, hands still dirty, shirt damp from working, and there she was, standing on my porch like she'd rehearsed this 100 times and had forgotten every single word. Elena Morris. Albert Morris's daughter. Now, if you grew up in Wheatland, you know the Morris name the same way you know the sound of a storm rolling in. Albert Morris was the kind of man who owned half the county and believed he had a right to the other half as well. He was the one who had pushed the bank to foreclose on this very farm when my father was sick and behind on payments. He was the one who told the loan officer I'd never be able to manage it on my own. He was the one who sent a letter, formal and cold, saying the land would be auctioned unless I came up with 3 months of payments in 14 days. I had come up with them. Barely. But I had. And now his daughter was standing on my bottom step, clutching the front of her coat like it was the only thing holding her together, and her eyes were red from crying she hadn't finished yet. I stepped down off the porch and gave her enough space that she wouldn't feel cornered. She looked up fast like she'd braced herself for rejection, for pity, maybe even for anger. "I lost my job at the Whitmore estate," she said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't have anywhere to go before the weekend. I know what my father did to you. I know you have every reason to turn me away." She stopped, swallowed. "He said you had a barn." I didn't laugh. I didn't ask her to repeat herself, because I heard more in what she wasn't saying than in the words she'd chosen. Her father had sent her here. Albert Morris, the man who thought I was nothing, had sent his own daughter to my door because he knew that I was the kind of man who wouldn't turn her away. And I didn't know yet whether to be insulted by that or to take it as the strangest compliment I'd ever received. I looked at her. Her boots were dusty from the road. Her coat was old, the kind you wear because it still works, not because it's pretty. And her eyes, when they met mine and didn't flinch away from the scar the way most people's did, her eyes were just tired, hollowed out by something I didn't fully understand yet. And there was a small, careful flicker in them, the kind a person gets when they've stopped hoping but haven't quite given up. "My father didn't send me," I said. She blinked. "He taught me," I said quietly. "When I came back here with nothing and no one, he taught me how to read the weather, how to fix the pump, how to read the soil, what to plant next season." I paused. I was talking about a different man. Not her father, my father. And she was starting to understand that. He was the one who told the bank I deserved another chance. She was still standing there, very still, like she was afraid movement would break something. I took one more step, but I still didn't touch her. "You're not a burden," I said. "You're a person who's out of options on a Wednesday afternoon." "Those are two different things." She didn't say anything, but something in her shoulders, some rigid, braced thing, finally let go. I showed her to the small room at the back of the house. Not the barn. I want to be clear about that. Whatever her father had told her, whatever she'd been prepared for, she wasn't sleeping in a barn. The room was plain. A single iron bed, a quilt my mother had made, a window that looked out over the east field where the light was better in the mornings. There was a cedar chest along, the wall that still faintly held the smell of my mother's winter things. She stood in the doorway and looked at it like she'd forgotten what a room like. "That was supposed to mean, the bathroom is across the hall," I said. "There's hot water. Towels in the cabinet." I moved to leave. Then I stopped. "If anyone asks, you're helping with the market paperwork. I do need help with that." "It's not a story." She looked at me. "Why are you being kind to me?" The question was honest. She wasn't testing me. She was genuinely confused. "Because being unkind to you wouldn't fix anything your father did," I said. "And it would make me someone I don't want to be." I went downstairs. I heard the door close softly behind me. That night I lay awake longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, listening to the old house settle around me. There was someone else breathing in it. Someone else's footsteps, light, careful, crossing the upstairs hall at some point around midnight. The sound of the bathroom faucet. Then silence again. I hadn't realized until that moment how long I'd been living with only the sound of my own house, how completely I'd stopped expecting anything else from it. The next morning I was already out in the field when she came down. When I came back to the porch for water around 8, she had made coffee. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of my market records in front of her. The chaos of 3 seasons of handwritten logs, purchase receipts, seed orders, and half-finished inventory counts that I'd been meaning to organize since spring. She had already sorted them by date. She looked up when I came in, like she was waiting to be told to stop. "You didn't have to," I said. "I know," she said, "but I'm good with numbers. And you've got 3 seasons of records in here that aren't talking to each other." She paused. "I'll need a few days." "Is that all right?" I looked at the coffee, then at her. "It's all right." We found a rhythm in the days that followed the way 2 careful people find a rhythm, slowly, with a lot of unspoken negotiation. She managed the books in the mornings while I worked the fields. In the afternoons, she'd come out, sometimes with a question about a receipt, sometimes just to walk the perimeter of the property like she was learning its edges. She never got in the way. She didn't try to fill every silence with conversation. That, more than anything, was what I wasn't prepared for, because the kind of quiet she brought into the house wasn't the same as the kind I'd been living in. Mine had been empty. Hers was just present. On the second evening, she made dinner without asking. I came in from the barn to find the kitchen warm, and something on the stove that smelled like onions and rosemary, and the particular comfort of food made by someone who knows what they're doing. I stood in the doorway for a moment, and she heard me and turned halfway and said, "I hope that's all right. I found the rosemary in the window box." And I said it was fine, and we ate at the table across from each other, and the conversation was careful and surface level and exactly right for where we were. She asked about the chickens. I asked about the records. We didn't push past what felt natural, and something about that was more unusual than I could have easily explained. I had not had someone in this house in a long time, not like this. There had been neighbors at the door and a repairman and the county extension officer each spring. But none of them had stayed. None of them had sat across from me at dinner and made the silence feel less like a verdict and more like just weather. Something that happened between 2 people who didn't yet have enough shared language to fill all the space, and who were patient enough not to force it. On the 4th day, she found the old ledger from the year my father died. I was on the porch when she came out holding it, and I could tell by the way she carried it that she'd already understood what it meant. "This is the year the bank nearly took the farm," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." She sat down on the step below me. Not across from me, below, like she was making herself smaller on purpose. He didn't do it because he hated you, she said. My father. He did it because the land borders our property on the east and he wanted the water rights. She kept her eyes on the ledger. I didn't know that then. I was 19. I only found out last year when I found his files. I didn't say anything. I'm not asking you to forgive him, she said. I'm not even sure I have. I thought you deserved to know there was a reason, even if the reason was ugly. She finally looked up, and there it was again, that scar-direct gaze, no flinching. You deserved to know you weren't nothing to him? You were a threat. That's different. I let that sit for a while. How'd you end up at the Whitmore estate? I asked eventually. She almost smiled. Running away from the Morris name while still having to use it to get hired. She set the ledger on the step between us. Mrs. Whitmore knew my father. She gave me the job because she thought it would irritate him. She was right. It did. She paused. Then Mrs. Whitmore had a fall in September, and her son came from Portland to manage the estate. He let the whole household staff go in a week. And your father? Her jaw tightened. Said I should come home. Said it had been long enough. That I'd proved whatever I was trying to prove. She shook her head. I've been trying to prove that I'm not him. That I'm not just his name walking around in a person's body. She looked out at the field. I don't know if I've managed it yet. The wind came through the wheat and moved it in long, slow waves. The kind of movement that looks effortless from the outside and takes years of patience to grow. You're here, I said. That's not nothing. She looked at me sideways, like she didn't quite know what to do with that. That Saturday was market day in Wheatland. I loaded the truck before dawn. The last of the summer squash, 3 varieties of winter apples, dried herbs, 24 jars of honey from the hives on the south side. Elena was already awake when I came through the kitchen. She'd packed the smaller items in labeled boxes without being asked. She'd even written the price signs in a clean, even hand I didn't have. She climbed into the truck without asking if she could come. I didn't say she couldn't. We barely spoke on the drive in. She sat with her hands in her lap and watched the road. I could feel the moment we passed through the edge of town, the way she straightened slightly, the way her chin came up. Like she was putting something on, armor maybe, or just the old habit of being Albert Morris's daughter in public. We set up the stall together. She worked fast and efficiently, with the kind of practiced calm that comes from years of managing other people's complicated expectations. By 8 o'clock, we had a line. I watched how she talked to people. She remembered names. She asked the right questions. When old Gerald Cole came by and talked for 10 minutes about his bad knee, she listened like she had all the time in the world. And I noticed at one point that she was watching me from the corner of her eye, waiting to see if I'd get impatient, if I'd show her who I really was when I thought no one important was looking. I helped Gerald carry his bag to his truck. It wasn't a performance. It was just what you did. There was a moment, around 10 in the morning, when the market hit its quietest lull between the early crowd and the lunch rush. She was restacking a row of honey jars, and I was behind the table doing nothing particularly useful. And a woman I didn't recognize stopped at the end of the stall and looked at me for a beat too long before her gaze slid carefully away. I was used to that. I'd been used to it for 10 years. I knew the exact sequence, the flicker of notice, the polite reorientation, the decision to look at the product instead of the person selling it. There is a particular brand of kindness that is really just avoidance, and I had learned to spot it fast. I didn't hold it against anyone. People were doing what made them comfortable, but it had a weight to it every single time. A small and cumulative weight you got very practiced at pretending wasn't there. Elena had seen it happen. She didn't acknowledge it directly. She didn't perform some obvious counter gesture to prove a point. She just turned to me with complete ordinary steadiness and said, "Do you think we should add another apple variety next year? Or is 3 already too many choices?" Like we were in the middle of a conversation that mattered, because it did matter, and the rest of it was just noise passing through. That was the first time I thought, this is a different kind of person. When I came back from the truck, Elena's expression had changed in a way I didn't know how to name yet. She looked at the display of apples she was arranging and said very quietly, almost to herself, "My father said you were rough, unreliable, barely keeping the farm going out of stubbornness." I picked up an apple and set it in place. He wasn't entirely wrong about the stubbornness. She almost laughed. The sound was small and surprised, like it had gotten out before she could catch it. Gerald stopped on his way past and tipped his hat. "Your daddy fixed my lawnmower every summer for free," he said to Elena. Then he looked at me. "Good man, his father," he said. "The farm always looked better when he was running it." He nodded and walked on. Elena's eyes went bright. But she didn't cry. She pressed her lips together and looked down at the table. "Thank you," she said quietly. Not to me, or not only to me. By mid-October, she had the 3 seasons of records reconciled. She'd built me a proper ledger system in a notebook and left notes in the margins about what she'd noticed. A vendor overcharging on seed deliveries, a pattern in which crops sold better at the early market versus the late one, a gap in my insurance coverage she thought I should look at. She left it on the kitchen table on a Tuesday morning with a folded piece of paper on top. I opened it. It said, "I think I've found a job at the print shop in Dalmore. It's an hour from here. I'll be gone before Friday. I don't know how to thank you for what you gave me." Not just the room. I knew she meant something larger than that. I sat at the table for a long time. The coffee got cold. Outside, the field was going amber, the last of the warm season burning off the tops of the wheat before the cold came in. I thought about what the house would sound like on Friday night. I thought about the empty chair across from mine. I thought about how, somewhere in the past 2.5 weeks, I'd stopped noticing the scar in the mirror the way I usually did. Because when someone looks at your face the way she looked at it, like it's just your face, like it's just part of the whole of you, it starts to feel like that. I picked up a pen. I wrote below her note, "The East Field still needs help on the bookkeeping side. Market season runs through November. The job at the print shop will be there in December, too." I folded it back up. I left it on top of her door before she woke up. I didn't wait to see what she'd do with it. I went out to the field at first light the way I always did. I worked the row closest to the barn until the morning got long and bright. And then I heard the back porch door open, and I heard her boots on the wooden steps, and I heard her walking toward me through the field without trying to be quiet about it. She stopped a few feet away. She was holding the note. "November," she said. "November," I said. She looked at the field, then at me. I'm not good at accepting things. I know. I'm not used to people not wanting something in return. I know that too. She looked down at the note in her hand. "What do you want in return?" I looked at her for a long moment. The morning light was doing something particular to the color of her hair, and the wheat was moving around us, and somewhere on the south field, one of the cows was making slow, peaceful noise. "I want someone to talk to at dinner," I said, "and someone who doesn't mind that I'm not much of a talker, and someone who organizes my records without being asked and notices that Gerald Cole could use help with his bags." I stopped. "I'm not asking for anything you're not already being." She was very still. "That's everything," I said. "That's the whole list." She looked at me for a long time, and then she put the note in her coat pocket, and she said, "Show me what needs doing today." So I did. November came the way it always does in wheatland, sudden and final, like a door closing on something warm. The wheat went from gold to pale to bare. The pumpkins all came in. The last of the market Saturdays turned cold enough that I could see my breath over the stall. And Elena wore her coat and a borrowed scarf of my mother's that she'd found in the cedar chest and asked if she could use. I'd said yes, without thinking. Later I thought about how natural the asking had been, and how natural the yes had felt. She stayed through November. She got the job at the print shop in Dalmore in December and took it, driving the hour each way 3 days a week. On the evenings she came back, she'd sit across from me at the table and tell me about the work. And I'd tell her about the field, and neither of us pretended that was all we were doing. One night in December, the first snow of the season came in fast and heavy, and the power went out around 8. I found candles, and she found the old radio that still ran on batteries. and we sat in the kitchen by candlelight, listening to a station from Portland playing Christmas songs that neither of us particularly liked, but that neither of us changed. She said, "I used to think quiet meant something was wrong." I looked across the table at her. "My father's house was never quiet," she said. "It was either arguing or performance. Even the silence was loaded." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "This is the first quiet that's ever felt like rest." The candle between us threw shadows that moved gently against the wall. "You can tell me to stop if I'm about to say something." "Embarrassing," she said. "All right. I don't want to go to Dalmore." "On the days I'm not supposed to go to Dalmore," she said. She was looking at the candle. "I think about being back here by dinner, and it makes the work go faster. And I don't know what to do with that." I didn't say anything for a moment. "You don't have to do anything with it," I said. She looked up. "You can just let it be what it is," I said. "You don't have to name it or fix it or make a decision about it tonight." I paused. "You're allowed to just have it." She stared at me, like no one had ever given her permission to simply feel a thing without immediately having to manage it. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay," I said. The radio played on. The snow came down outside the kitchen window, soft and steady, filling in the edges of the field. The candle burned low. She didn't leave the table, and neither did I. January was cold and clear and full of work. I was winterizing the water lines, mending fencing along the east field, cataloging the seed inventory for spring. She helped when she was home and didn't when she wasn't. And we'd found a way of being in the same house that felt less like a temporary arrangement and more like something that had been there for a long time and was only now being recognized. Evening, she came home from Dalmore and stood in the kitchen doorway with her coat still on and her keys in her hand and said, "My father called the shop." I turned from the stove. "He wants me to come home," she said. "He has a position for me, managing his accounts." Her voice was careful, controlled, the same voice she used at the market when she was holding something in. "He said he'd heard I was living on your farm, and he said—" She stopped. "What did he say?" She set her keys on the counter. She finally took her coat off. She was choosing her words. "He said you were a good man who'd been handed a difficult face and a harder life, and that a woman with any future at all shouldn't tie herself to someone like that." She said it flatly, the way you read a sentence that's too ugly to give any extra feeling to. The kitchen was quiet. "And what did you say?" I asked. She looked at me. Her eyes were direct and clear and absolutely unafraid. "I told him I'd call him back," she said. "And then I drove home." Home. She'd said it without noticing. I turned back to the stove. "Dinner's in about 10 minutes, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she came over and stood beside me and said, "What are we having?" "Soup," I said. "The good kind, with the bread." "Okay," she said. She stayed. She called her father back the next morning from the porch while I was in the barn. I couldn't hear the words. I only heard the tone, firm, unhurried, final. The kind of tone a person uses when they've decided something and aren't arguing about it anymore, just delivering a fact. When I came back in, she was at the table with her coffee and her notebook working on the spring seed order. She didn't mention the call. I didn't ask. But that afternoon, for the first time, when I came in from the field, she was standing at the window watching for me. She didn't say anything. She just handed me my coffee mug and went back to the table. I stood there holding the mug for a moment, then I sat down. And I opened the seed catalog. And I said, "I'm thinking about adding another acre of vegetables on the south side this spring. But it'd need more hands in the morning." She looked up from her notebook. "I can do mornings," she said. February arrived, and with it the first real thaw, and the particular smell of earth waking up that I'd spent 10 years learning to love alone. The day it came, the day the mud softened and the creek ran fast and the birds came back to the field, Elena came out of the house before I could even get to the barn, and she stood in the middle of the yard with her face turned up and her eyes closed and just breathed it in. I stopped walking. She looked like something I hadn't let myself look for in a very long time. She looked like the answer to a question I'd stopped asking. She opened her eyes. She caught me looking. She didn't look away. "What?" she said. I shook my head. "Nothing." She came toward me. She stopped a foot away. She looked up at me with that same direct gaze that had never once flinched from my face. Not from the first day she'd stood at the bottom of my steps. Not once since. Matthew, she said. Yeah. I called you home, she said. I mean, when I drove back from Dalmore. In my head, I called it coming home. She looked at the field behind me. To you, not just the farm. To you. She said it carefully, like she was being precise about something important. And I thought you should know that. Because I've been not saying it for a while and it seems unfair not to say it. The creek ran. The birds moved through the field. The mud smelled like something beginning. It's not unfair, I said. It's exactly right. She looked back at me. I used to think, I said slowly, that the scar meant I'd gotten the version of my life I deserved. That I'd had my good years and the accident took them and what was left was just... I stopped. Just the farm. Just the quiet. Just getting through it. She was very still. I don't think that anymore, I said. I think I was wrong about what the quiet was for. She didn't move for a long moment. And then she did the thing I wasn't expecting. She reached up and put her hand against my cheek. The scarred side, with a steadiness that had nothing of pity in it. Just presence. Just the solid fact of her hand on my face. You're not a difficult life, she said. You're the first easy thing I've been near in years. I covered her hand with mine. We stood there in the middle of the yard in the February thaw, the field coming back to life around us, and I thought about her father sending her to my door because he thought I'd take her in out of charity. And I thought about how wrong he'd been about the reason, about the direction of it.